let's go across to our guest, Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, senior journalist and foreign affairs commentator, joining us at this point. Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, even as we see Prime Minister Modi being feted at this State Department luncheon, lots of jokes being shared about yoga and the Samosa caucus. One thing, of course, is clear that while this state visit is high on optics, as is true of most such visits, it can be safely said that this is one visit that's also very high on substance. Just a short while ago, we saw the Prime Minister flanked by the President of the United States at the White House at this high-tech handshake event where once again he was surrounded by some of the biggest names in corporate India and corporate America. Your thoughts on how this visit has panned out?
I think at the heart of what we've seen the past few days has been a determined effort by both governments to create a sweeping technological partnership. It's not just the normal government-to-government stuff that NASA will work with ISRO, that our quantum computing missions will merge forces, that India and the US will work together on nuclear reactors and so on. Almost every possible scientific government agency in both countries, at least in cutting-edge technologies, has effectively been matched in the summit. But it is also basically a call by, or policies laid out and roadmaps being laid out by the US, saying that their defense industry will work now with Indian companies to build a defense industry base in India, that their semiconductor companies will integrate Indian firms into their supply chains, that pharmaceutical companies and sectors on both sides will work together to create safe and secure supply chains. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's virtually no critical technology that India has any capacity to do or for that has not been brought into this picture. And then on top of that, arguably the most sensitive area, defense technology, America has said, has done what it has never done for a non-treaty ally or a country that has not signed a treaty alliance with them, to say that we are a jet engine for a fighter, an extraordinarily difficult piece of technology. Only 4 countries in the world know how to make a fighter jet engine of this quality. Neither Germany or Japan know how to do it. We are giving you 11 of the core technologies involved in making that jet engine, and you learn how to master this and make it yourself. So you're really looking at a 21st century technology partnership. And this is important because technology, strategic technology, is, I would argue, being accepted as the real core of power in the coming century.
Well, you're quite right. There isn't a single significant area of technology cooperation that hasn't been covered in this summit. From the all-important semiconductor deal that's been struck with Micron, that's going to invest in a $2.75 billion chip-making facility here in India. It's going to be a first for India. Or, the much talked about Predator drone deal that's, said to be a game changer for India's armed forces. And of course, the big one that you just talked about, the deal for the joint manufacture of GE F414 fighter jet engines right here in India, because what it comes with this time is transfer of technology. A huge first for India, a huge first for the India-US relationship, given that this was actually a thorny issue between the two sides in the past. The fact that the US, for years and decades denied us technology, and now suddenly India finds itself in this elite club that you said comprises barely 4 other nations. When you look at the whole gamut of issues that have been covered and the deals that have been struck, what does this tell you about how the United States views its partnership with India today. Of course, President Biden has said this relationship is going to define the 21st century. How much is this about the US realizing that India is really the country that it needs to, in a sense, invest in as it deals with an increasingly belligerent China? And how much is this about the US trying to wean India off its dependence on Russia for weapon supplies?
So it's a combination of both, but I'll also add, and I stress this because there was an interview, I believe, in the Hindustan Times, where the National Security Advisor of Biden, Jake Sullivan, was asked about this. He said, is this because of China and Russia? And he said, look, yes, that helps. But let's understand that we have decided that working with India as a technology partner and working to resolve global problems like climate is effectively in America's interest. In other words, even without China, even without Russia, America would still be reaching out to India. And this, in many ways, I would argue, is a revival or a resurrection of a position originally laid out by President George W. Bush when he began the so-called Indo-US nuclear deal in 2005, where one of his aides publicly said, America commits itself to making India a major power, that it will invest in India. After that, that remained in some way or another, but I would argue got lost over time, both in later administrations and also because the Indian system struggled in many ways to fulfill its own side of the bargain. This summit, I would argue, we see the resurrection of that position, that America will invest in India to make it a genuine power and a partner for America in the 21st century. So it's, yes, China definitely is part of it. I would argue a very big part of the strategic relationship, and definitely the defense element is China. Russia, yes, but keep in mind that what America has been offering us on the defense side will take 10, 20 years to mature. It's not like we are going to start building the jet engine overnight. So I would argue the India-Russia relationship will struggle anyway in that time span because of Russia's increasing dependence on China for for spare parts and for components and technology. So it's really about what's happening now. And China, yes, but also a technology relationship, because it's important to realize one of the things America recognizes, and I've talked to US officials over the years, they've said this, China's game is not to militarily defeat the United States or militarily defeat India. It's prepared to use military force to send messages. But China's game is to become the technological superpower. So in things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, green hydrogen, synthetic biology, China's view is if we become number one in these, we automatically become the dominant power of the world. People will come to us. We don't have to do anything. America recognizes this, and America, obviously being the superpower in technology since the 1950s, feels it has to respond. The Quad is about technology. It's an understanding of the four countries in the Quad, India included, that being dependent or allowing China to be the number one in these technologies is against their national interests. And which is why the Quad is 26 working groups inside the Quad, 23 are all about technology. So you're looking at an understanding already that exists among those four countries that we have to be the dominant players in these technologies. And what America's recognized, that if you look at the countries that it works with technologically, the Europeans are still divided about how to respond to China. The Japanese, of course, are a great technology nation, but in many ways slowly losing the plot, largely because they're running out of people. They're in a rapidly aging population. Same with Korea, Taiwan. So where does America go? Because what America realizes, it cannot take on China by itself, even in the technology sphere, and despite its long-standing capacities in that area. But if they look at their own numbers, something like 20% of all the artificial intelligence workers in America are of Indian origin. If you go through Silicon Valley, where do you see Indians? We literally we provide a huge chunk of the growing manpower requirements in STEM and so on. So America is looking at India and saying, well, the easiest solution, therefore, would be let's just invest in India. Let's make India the partner because it's already moving in that direction anyway. And it agrees with us that China cannot be number one in these areas.
That's interesting. You know, that you believe the United States does see India as a countervailing force against China, and it does believe that it needs to equip India to take on China in the technology race in the long run. But there is, of course, the other aspect to this. You know, China is growing aggression, belligerence, expansionism, call it what you like, in the Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while addressing the US Congress, said this, and I'm quoting him: the dark clouds of coercion and confrontation are casting their shadow in the Indo-Pacific. The stability of the region has become one of the central concerns of our partnership. We share a vision of a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific that's free from domination. So obviously, you know, while India has these border tensions with China, it's growing. Expansionism is something that worries the international community at large, including the United States. How do you think Beijing might be viewing this state visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi? Of course, it doesn't help that President Biden called Xi Jinping a dictator just 2 days ago.
Though I should note that the Chinese constitution, in somewhere in its opening clauses, calls itself a people's dictatorship. But anyway, yes, you know, Biden recently mentioned how when he was elevating the Quad from being a foreign minister's level to being a head of state, head of government, a genuine summit level organization, he got a phone from Xi Jinping saying, "Don't do this. Don't raise the Quad to this level." And he, of course, said, "Well, you know, that's unfortunate, but I'm going to be going ahead and doing this." While the Chinese dismiss the Quad, in their media says, you know, it's the froth on the ocean and stuff, so on like that will dissipate and so on. It's very clear that they're nervous about it because it is an alliance of countries who recognize that technology is at its core. It has quasi-military elements to it, maritime domain surveillance. And of course, we have a Malabar naval exercise, which is separate, officially separate from the Quad, but whose membership is exactly identical to the 4 members of the Quad. And to make it worse for China, other countries are now expressing interest. Can we align with the Quad? The South Korean President Yoon asked to join the Quad summit in Tokyo last time. He didn't make it in the end, but he said, I would like to attend. And I know other countries, even in Europe, as far afield as Europe, have come and said, you know, could we find out what you guys are doing? And maybe we can align what we do in technology. Taiwan monitors what we do within the Quad. So yes, I think that's all there. And as we know, we have a set of military relationships which are separate from the Quad, but incorporate Quad members that are building up. AUKUS, for example, in the South Pacific.
Which India would like to be a part of, right?
I think India can't join the nuclear submarine element, but there's the AUKUS has AUKUS 2.0, which is in the making, has a cybersecurity, maritime defense security technology element, and this is something India is eyeing. By buying the Predator, it's important to realize the Predator drones give us interoperability with almost every major Indo-Pacific country ex-China, because almost all of them use the same Predator. It's not necessarily that we weren't offered other drones of that nature by other countries. I know Israel, for example, was making a very strong offer, and it's Heron 2. But we decided to go for the geopolitically relevant technology, which was the Predator.
Well, certainly a lot of landmark deals there that are going to become the leitmotif, not just of this historic state visit, but indeed of the India-US relationship itself. Perhaps it would be safe to say that the world will be watching with a lot of interest. On that note, Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and inputs.